go, buddy. Coming at you.
It's
hot.
Dude, man, coming in hot. It's March 21st, the year 2023. Welcome, everybody. Listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 669.
You got it right. There was a lot of confusion there this morning.
There was. I feel like we're inching closer to 1,000, and sometimes I feel like we're stuck on 200. But that's just kind of how life goes. It's give us and take it away. It goes by slow, it goes by fast. Hope your weekend was spectacular. It is a gloomy, gross day here in Overland Park. It is cold, it is crisp, but fear not. I'm headed down to the hotness, the lava-filled tundra of Texas later today, and we'll start we have our preseason triathlon camp there in the Woodlands. Got 22 athletes coming in from all over to do a little swim bike run and shake off the rust from what honestly feels like a pretty short quote unquote off season since we are back and rocking out in the busy part of the season, at least for here in North America. It starts the first weekend in April, but looking forward to that. It'll be exciting. Looking forward to seeing our athletes there, but also looking forward to meeting a few listeners. So it's always exciting. It's always a fun time to be immersed in the environment where athletes are there working hard, supporting each other, and especially when most of the athletes have been stuck on the trainer or treadmill and in cold environments. We got people from New York and Minnesota coming in, so it's going to be like what is this? I mean, it's going to be 80. So I already know I'm going to die, like a slow death on the first run out. It's like it's going to feel like 100. Yeah. So I'm just kind of preparing myself mentally to take it really, really, really easy and chill the first couple of days, because it's gonna be a rude awakening. But I'm excited about it. Anything new up north in your neck of the woods? More snow, more cold, more dreary days?
A little bit of dreary, no snow. It was really, really cold this weekend. Like, I think the coldest weekend of the year. Because of the wind, it was just unbelievable.
Dang.
I was up at the lake. I was watching the games up there in the comfort of my cottage with no interruptions. And it was just bitter cold. I just stayed in there. We had the fire going, and that was about it. Mm-hmm. Be patient down there, man. I've seen that 40 degree.
I'm embracing
the 40 degree swing.
Yeah, it's a big swing. I'll embrace the patience, and of course, like what'll happen is I'll get there, I'll get all lathered up, and by Sunday morning after the long run right there on the waterway on the Ironman Texas course, I'll be ready to rock for a nice hot part of the season, and I'll come back to 30s, and I'll feel soft again because I'll have gotten totally acclimated to it being warm. But you know what? There's worse things in life. We hope this podcast is not one of those things. Hope it's a great one. It's your first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe, and just podcasts in general sounds very valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings on this planet, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at their very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite amateurs trying to get back to world championships, and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also utilize frequently our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer once to a question, we'll let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, and amazing resource in a sport that can oftentimes be overcomplicated and confusing with nutrition and gear and transitions and 3 different sports and how they combine together and what races to do and what technology do you need. It's a great supportive spot in the triathlon space to ask questions and get great answers from a wide range of experienced level athletes with different goals and different journeys. So be part of that community. Don't be a lurker, and we'll go in there about once a month and do a little bit of a Q&A, take the pulse of the community. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We definitely don't do ads. We do have an agenda, though, and it's the important one. And that's to do our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Now, if somebody gets a wild hair up their ass and wants to go to Texas camp this weekend, can they still do it? Not me.
Oh, wild hair. You'd have to have the wildest of hairs. And most triathletes are the anti-wild hair. Unless
that's
it's like
true.
during a workout and they want to go like, an extra 2 hours just because, they quote unquote had to.
Yeah.
Most people plan extensively. We do, if you're local, we do have a drop-in rate because we have actually quite a few athletes pick up the pool option on Friday. We're doing a pool session. We have, I think, 5 or 6 athletes there in the Houston Woodlands area are going to pop in. So yeah, if you're interested in coming on Friday or being a part of any of the sessions, kind of like on an a la carte basis, you can't make the whole camp. You don't want to make the whole camp, but you got that wild hair. Just email me, c26coach@gmail.com, and I will see if we can get you in. We got the welcome dinner tomorrow night, and the schedule's there. But yeah, if you want to do a drop in, and especially if you're coming, or if you want to just come in, hop in the swim with us. We're doing open water Thursday. We got a pool session on Friday. Come and join us. And my favorite place on this world is being the pool deck. So come and enjoy. But yeah, shoot me an email if you got that wild hair in your ass, and I'll see if I can take care of it.
Yeah. It is your favorite place in the world. It's kind of funny how in one lifetime it went from your least favorite place to your most favorite place.
That's so true. Well, it is the pool deck inside the pool was my the pool deck itself. Like that's where the pool deck itself at the Conqueror YMCA in Brentwood's where I quit. I've talked about that before, but yeah, I love it. I love working with athletes hands on. I love being on the pool deck. I love shorts, hoodie, t-shirt, bare feet, the water, some music, and people just working hard. I mean, it is my favorite place. It's great to be able to, again, be hands-on and focus on technique and work things out. And then really just watch the athletes in the lanes that they're in, support each other and work hard. It's a great environment. It's just energizing. It is. It's my happy place.
Good.
It's my happy place. And before we get into today's topic, I just want to give a shout out to my Vols for making it to the Sweet 16.
Congratulations, dude.
That's Seth Green overseeded.
Felt good about that for you.
I didn't get to watch most of it, but I heard we bullied them. But that's what happens when you're older. You got more experience. You
guys are tough, man. You guys are strong and tough and gritty.
We are. We like, as I said post game, we like to get them in the mud.
Mudders. Her mudder was a mudder.
Mudders.
Her mudder was a mudder.
I was just thinking that her mudder was a mudder.
And Badgers are in the Elite 8 of the NIT.
Of the NIT. Yeah. Congratulations.
I think the NIT is more exciting, actually, now that I think about it.
No, of course you do. Yeah, it's funny how that changes. But listen, it's a great, and it's kind of a decent segue into our topic because it is. It's the NIT isn't the granddaddy of them all, but it is. It's a great way for those kids to create positive momentum and more practice and game experience for next year. Which is all positive. And so today's topic, since, again, we are about to kick off the North American race calendar, and the majority of our listeners are here in North America. We do have, a little bit of international flavor that listens in. And if you're tuning in and you are international, we love you. We appreciate everyone across the pond that gives us a listen. We've had an athlete do Ironman New Zealand. We had one of our athletes do Puerto Rico 70.3. Over this last weekend, and that's kind of the driver for the topic today. We've got a busy season. It's always busy. Once kind of April 1st hits, if you're an athlete, if you're a coach, everything kind of takes an uptick. There's ITU races, there's local races. You got big half marathons and marathons early in the year. You got Texas 70.3, Oceanside 70.3 with a huge pro field there that first week of April. Then you got Ironman Texas, Tulsa. It's packed. Chattanooga's down the line. It's once it starts, it doesn't stop until about the second week of December after Indian Wells. It's just jam packed. And so as we get into there, and we've been kind of distanced from racing, a lot of athletes put in a lot of hard work in. Some athletes haven't. and we had an athlete race over the weekend who had just a really extraordinary result on paper. Like if you're following this athlete, and she was 8th overall female at Puerto Rico 70.3, and then had the fastest swim, bike, and run in her age group. And the topic of the day is not the performance itself, but the discussion around what makes a great race, not just from a coach's perspective, but from the athlete's perspective. And that's should be the most important thing for everyone, whether you're an athlete or a coach. The athlete's experience and the athlete's feelings are what's most important. But it's also very, very important to focus on the objective things that a lot of athletes tend to forget, right? Everybody starts the season, they sign up for races, 70.3s, fulls, half marathons, full marathons, sprints, Olympics, and everybody, while we always say, finishing is always the goal, finishing, I'll be happy if I finish. Everybody, whether you put it on paper or not, whether you make it public or not, everybody has these let's say your A goal is to quote unquote finish, and have fun. Everybody, again, whether it's publicly or privately, has these like B, C, D, E goals. I mean, myself included. Like if I'm doing a race, I have a note card out, and I have swim, bike, and run splits, and I have 3, kind of like 3 tiers. Like terrible swim, decent swim, great swim, and I do that for all 3. That way, people that are following me or tracking me kind of know like what kind of day I'm having, and I'm usually pretty close, but as we get into the season, and you've either put in a lot of great work, right, or you've maybe slacked off a little bit. The first thing, right, before I get into the first thing,
okay,
is this athlete again had an incredible race, won her age group, and had a bunch of athletes texting me. I was on the road driving back from Nashville. I was like, "Hey, did you killed it?" And I was kind of given a meet. I don't really get super pumped, and they're like, "Oh, well, why don't you?" I'm like, I want to hear from her how she felt she did, because as a coach, the awards, the placing stuff, like it matters to the athlete. And so if it matters to the athlete, it matters to you. But the most important thing as a coach is to hear firsthand how they felt it went, right? Because they could feel terrible. They feel like the race could have gone horrific. They had a terrible swim. Their nutrition went poorly. They didn't feel trained. They didn't feel fit. They didn't feel prepared. Who gives a shit if they got first? It's like, who cares? But I think it's a great discussion and point to make, that how the athlete feels it went is primary. And that's you, right? If you're listening, whether you are a coach or an athlete, you're usually both. You're a coach and an athlete, or you're just an athlete. That's the biggest important thing. And you and I talk about this extensively, on a micro level. Each and every day you do a workout, right? You head out, you have a 30-minute run, a 45-minute run, you do an hour and a half ride, you do a swim, and you get out, and everybody kind of does that immediate, like, man, that felt great, or, man, I feel fit, or, that didn't go very well. And then the next thing we do is look at our watch, right? What was the pace? What was the heart rate? What was the time? And then we judge ourselves again. And usually that time totally overrides our feeling. Right. And so that on a micro level is something that athletes go through every day. They could say, I felt like this was incredible, or I went too fast. And even they felt incredible. So that's kind of the genesis of the direction of today's topic. And the first thing is always ask yourself when you finish, regardless of placement, regardless of if you wanted to go, sub 6 in your 70.3, or sub 2.5 in your Olympic, or sub 110 in your sprint, or whatever it was, before you even look at your time, before anything, ask yourself, number one, how do I feel? How did I feel today? Did I feel good? Did I feel bad? Right? That's the most important question you can ask yourself, because whether you feel good or whether you feel bad then dictates kind of, if you look at kind of those kind of like trees, they write out, you've got one outcome here and one outcome here, and you answer this question, it takes you like the next bubble. Your good and your bad take you to the next bubble of the next question. So if you feel good, then you kind of go down the next bubble and you think, all right, what did I feel good about today? Did I feel prepared? Why did today go good? Ask yourself these questions. If the race went bad, why do you feel like the race went bad? Was it you weren't prepared? Was it was too hot? Was it that it was windy? Was it that maybe you did better than you thought, but you didn't feel fit? So I've got a bunch of different topics to go through, but that's where I wanted to kind of leap into, was that overall feeling in your gut before you look at the metrics, before you look at the data, before you look at the placement, and really before you look at the clock, it's always best to start with, number one, how did I feel today? And then go from there instead of leaping to the conclusion of today went terrible and I'm not fit, or today went great because I got first place regardless of my fitness.
Yeah, it's a good thing to think about. I mean, right when you said that, one of the first things that came to my mind was there have been not certain races throughout my career, I guess, that where I felt really in control and I felt really I really understood where I was at throughout the whole race. And to me, that's like an unbelievable feeling. And I've talked about it before, but when you're out, especially on the bike too, it's kind of this idea of owning the course and controlling the course and not letting it control you. And when I feel like that, and when I can get to the run, and when you can kind of get halfway through the run and be in this headspace where you know you got it, and then it's just a matter of kind of messing around with the manifold or the gears and stuff like that, and then figuring out what's the edge. Because if you kind of have that mentality, it's a lot of times it kind of means I'm crystal clear mentally, and I know exactly how far I can push things, and I can kind of test and flirt around with the edges of things, rather than the opposite, which has been several of my races, and especially fulls. I mean, fulls are a little bit harder to kind of get that thing going, for me anyway. I mean, I get to the point where it's like, I feel like shit and I just got to keep going. It's like, and sometimes those races turn out good from a timing perspective, but I think a lot of times fulls become that, and it becomes who is the tougher person a lot of times on the last half of that marathon, so yeah, it is weird, you kind of have all these time goals in your mind, and I know you've talked about the 3 tiers, and I kind of have a similar thing going on with me as far as what I think is going to be a good day or whatever. And I don't know, it always kind of seems to come back to how I can control myself early in each of the phases. And for me, getting up early after 3 hours sleep is, I usually don't feel awesome when I get up anyway, but getting into the flow and things like that. And yeah, it is difficult to judge because you're always thinking about time and you're always thinking about pace. But man, last year up at Wisconsin, that was just out the window completely. So what was I doing to, and again, I'll look at that and say it was probably the hardest race I've ever done, but I thought I handled it really well. I mean, I didn't fall apart. I stayed, it was just one of these weird things where you're like, I just stayed warm and I felt like I could finish, and I just did what it took, but it wasn't by any means even close to something I was super proud of time-wise, but it was one of those things where I felt pretty good about it when you get done, And I think that it's just, you talk about it all the time, is like different days bring different things, and, you can have all the Pollyanna goals you want to have going into it, but as far as time, but you just have to really kind of feel good with how you performed, and how you approached it and how you dealt with everything that came up through the race when there's hundreds of different issues that go on. So how did you feel?
I mean, it's one of those, that's why I think, I always say, every person's planet should at some point work in the hospitality industry and wait tables, see how the other side lives and works and what it's like. I think every athlete should coach an athlete and watch it via Iron Track and go through like the ebbs and flows and the feelings. And I think everybody does that, whether you're tracking a friend, right, or you're a coach and you track athletes or whatever it is. All the things like you triage in your mind, because Iron Track can be, which is the tracker people use to follow like 70.3s and fulls, and it gives you splits after the swim or even midway, transition, multiple bike splits, multiple run splits, finish time, placing, all these things. So as a coach, you go in and you see, all right, this athlete's got this kind of fitness. I always kind of put athletes into the category of I think they've got this overall fitness time. I never I can kind of detail it down to swim, bike, and run splits, but I usually have, hey, this athlete has sub 5 hours, 5:05 hour fitness, or 5:30 fit overall fitness, because it all gels together, right? A too hard of a swim could lead to an easier bike could lead to a harder run. It's all about fitness, and it's all about energy expenditure. And that's kind of how you take that value into account when you're trying to assess how long an athlete's going to be on course. But things that you don't know, right, as an observer, and things you have to take into account as an athlete is, and maybe I'll just start at the top. It's like swimming. On paper, this athlete came out of the water 35 minutes. To me, it was a very solid swim. I didn't know what the conditions were like. I'd seen pictures of how windy it was. I didn't know if it was going to be wetsuit legal. I doubted it was going to be wetsuit legal, just because it's in Puerto Rico. But you never know. And you never know where Ironman race directors are going to drop the old temperature gauge out in the ocean. And I saw a 35-minute swim, and I thought to myself, man, that's pretty solid. Early season, we're in March, like that's a really great spot, because a lot of people kind of slough off in the off season or early in the season with swimming, and it's their least favorite place to go. This athlete was also coming from Colorado, right? So freezing cold to Puerto Rico,
right?
So
yeah,
so it
that is solid. Like, I would have thought the same thing.
Very, very solid. And then post race, I went from that solid to that was fucking awesome. It was non-wetsuit swim. It was this athlete's fastest ever non-wetsuit swim. And then the most important thing is, as a coach, and again, I'm giving this from a coach's perspective, but as the athlete is speaking through this, think about yourself and how you dissect your races. And they said, that's the hardest swim I've ever done. I thought I was going to drown.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. And I went to Wonderground and looked it up later on in the day to see the conditions, because I saw the time. I knew she did solid, but then I wanted to get a control of the conditions, and I saw 85 degrees. Okay. So you're coming from Colorado, you're going to 85 degrees sunshine, and then 20 to 25 mile an hour winds on the bike, and then rip current advisory. So all my thoughts went from that was good to, oh my God, you freaking killed it. Yeah. Like, so you take those conditions in the swim with a time, and you think, while the time might not have been their fastest swim ever, right? Wetsuit swim, you think about, Augusta 70.3, Chattanooga 70.3, even Boulder 70.3, like some of the swims where it's wetsuit legal, it's in a lake, it's protected, it's super fast and flat. You might have a faster time, but the question is what's your best swim? And you alluded to this on last week's podcast, Ironman Wisconsin. That, to me, that's my best performance ever, but it's my second fastest ever Ironman, but it's my best performance because the conditions and the hills and the lead up and just a harder course than Arizona, the where my PR is. And so you look at that and you go from solid to, man, you killed it, maybe best swim ever in a race, yet the time was a few minutes slower than her quote unquote best ever 70.3 swim. So that's a great example, I think, of just the swim in general, of how you assess and what you assume. You could do, again, these downriver swims, right, and have this great time, but it's aided, right? It's not, maybe it doesn't really mirror your level of fitness. Maybe you didn't swim a ton, right? You swam twice a week or once a week, and you went down and you raced the trash bag, right? The paper sack that they talk about in Chattanooga and Augusta, Ironman California, Oregon is the same way. It might be the fastest, like, and your time's faster. Then you go to a race where you don't get that free speed, right? And it's in rough waters, and your time's slower. What's your best? Right. So we get so caught up in the numbers and the metrics and the comparison from time to time, but nothing is ever the same, ever. Nothing. Even if you go to the same race, the same venue, and the same, second Sunday of September, the condition, this better than anybody. Wisconsin, it can be glass or it can be a washing machine, and you could put in, lax work and not swim a ton and go out and have a decent swim or a PR swim when it's flat. And then you could get your butt to work and swim the required amount and really work hard and go in and feel like you swam well. And you come out slower because, goes from one loop to two loops, automatically slower, right? And you got congestion, you got 70.3 athletes and waves, slower. And then you got, the washing machine that Wisconsin can be. So you got a slower time. What's better?
Yeah.
So it's a really important question that can sometimes change the direction of an athlete's, life cycle in racing, and they might give up quick, or they might get frustrated, or they might get tired of seeing the intent. That's why it's so incredibly important to have metrics that are not based on, simply times and splits or even the worst thing ever, miles per hour, right? In speed, it has to be on things like we always talk about, effort and execution, the two things you can control. Everything else either is going to aid in a positive way, or it's going to aid or not aid in a negative way, right? From the course, the conditions, the temperature, the wind, the dew point, the congestion, flat tires, drop bottles and aid stations, all these things. You can't control those. You can't control any of them. It's just about controlling your controllables, and that's the best place that any athlete can start.
Yeah. Man, it's funny. I was just thinking about that because it's, you go into these races sometimes and you think you're prepared and you're ready to go, and then you get dealt something like that, some kind of weather issue or whatever. And both times I've had one last year at Wisconsin and the one year at Louisville, that 100-degree year. It was so, hot. And both times I got out of the water feeling unbelievable. And then you get to a point, whether it was hot or it was cold. It was so cold and windy last year, and then it was so hot in Louisville that I got off the bike. You get done with the bike, and it's kind of like, well, last year I barely could get off the bike. It was just it's almost like how do you adjust going from a mindset where you're feeling, I'm going to have a pretty good race today, and then all of a sudden you deal with what's going on there. And then it goes from, I'm going to have a good race, so I'm not going to have a good race. And how do I mentally put that into my brain and deal with it? Because it was really more of a survival. It was more like, we talk about the first goal is to finish. And I'm, obviously I'm not thinking that way anymore after doing a bunch of them, but it almost comes into play. Like last year, we knew a lot of really good, triathletes who didn't finish at Wisconsin. And, it was just like a simple thing, usually like maybe the gloves that they were wearing weren't good enough or didn't, keep them warm enough. And at some point, I mean, that's what I mean about it. It kind of goes back to the thing about that Emery said is like, never believe how you're feeling during a race like that, because it's going to change. And it's true for any weather conditions really, but you have to be able to adjust on the fly. And that's why I said that about that mental piece with me, is I felt like I had my brain in the right spot for that day, because, it would have been real easy just to shit can the whole operation, but it was more about, okay, this isn't going to be pretty. This is going to be, something you got to dig deep for. And it's just another type of effort, and what you can feel good about it, but you're never going to look at that and put that time on your wall necessarily. But that's why I say to me, that's always is how can you adjust during the race and hit the spot where it's right for that moment. I was actually thinking about that last night on the treadmill. I was like, I feel pretty good here. I'm not going to push it too much harder. I'm just right on the edge. This is exactly what I need today. And then I think that in races, you kind of can do the same thing. This is exactly what I need right now. And whether or not you have goals on TriCalc and all these other things, you have to pay attention to that. And I think, to me, honestly, that is what happens with most people when they end up walking like this whole second loop or whatever. Something's going on and they're not paying attention to it and not giving it credibility. They've got something on their mind that they want to do, and they're not respecting the moment. And I think that there's so many opportunities. If you think about Ironman as a day in the life, how many times you might be, feeling down or slow or tired or whatever, and you got to kind of regroup. You don't push doubly hard at that point because you end up taking a nap. So I think that we have these moments throughout racing where we have to just really kind of feel. That's why I'm so big on feel, I think, is because I'm always thinking about stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, this feels pretty good. Oh, this might be too much. I'm going to pull this back a little bit. And to me, it's all about the control factor. The last 70.3 I did was probably my best. It wasn't my fastest. I think I had done faster at Muncie once, but it was just still a solid race. And I just felt like I really had a good perspective of what was going on with my run, and I didn't push it too hard, but I had enough, and I knew I always had enough. And those are the races that really feel the best for me.
You know, I love what you said right there in that, you know, your best can be a 10-minute mile, and it can also be a 7-minute mile. And when you go into races and you are only shooting for a time, and the only value you're going to get from it is a PR or a Kona slot or a top 10 in your age group or a fastest this. As soon as things get hard, as soon as that's gone out the window, I've as a coach, I've read athletes that have just, you know, they've learned from that experience because they've written it. And it sounds like this, and I think every athlete's kind of, you know, gone through this in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a hard training session or a race, big or small, whatever it is, you know, and it sounds like this. Once I knew I couldn't reach my goal, I kind of slowed down, or I kind of mailed it in, or I kind of quit, or I started walking, or I just bagged in. A lot of people do that. And that's why I think it's so important for you to hear is that in your best effort could be, you know, a sub 1 hour Ironman swim, or it could just be making it out of the water that day. It could be a 22 mile an hour bike split, or it could be a 16.5 with 4 flat tires. You know, it could be that 10-minute pace, or it could be that 7-minute pace. The effort is what makes the difference. The effort is what sticks with you, not the quitting, not the expectations that, frankly, most athletes pull out of their tricalic ass. You know, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can do this. And like, and you look back and you're like, no, you can't. No, like, no, like that's not even close to reasonable. You just pull it out, and then then the mind games start. But the thing that you leave yourself, probably when you talked about, you know, the trophies on the wall or the medals, it's like, it's the hard ones that mean the most to people. Yeah, you've got the ones that, you know, you've got the, you know, you had the perfect day. Well, guess what? If you only hang your hat on the perfect day, that's one out of however many races you're going to do for your entire life. So the rest aren't going to be up to snuff, right? You had I'll never forget that. I mean, whatever it was, 17, 18, you know, Louisville, when it was that cold, and we had everybody finish. Every single one of them said, it wasn't my fastest, but I've never been prouder of myself for finishing. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that changes how you approach things or how you approach races. And I think, you know, and again, it starts with and that's why I started with the swim, and we can cut it off here in a minute so we can make this little 2-parter before I hit the road. But that's why I always encourage athletes to not wear a watch on the swim. Because athletes, again, every athlete, yourself included, myself included, you get out of the water and you might think to yourself, I crushed that, right? I was flying. I've never been passing people before on the second loop, or I feel so energized that it felt like nothing, right? And you get out of the water and you look at your watch, and it's 3 minutes slower than what you had hoped.
Yep. It's 3 minutes. I know.
Right?
Yeah.
In triathlon terms, it's kind of like dog years, right? 3 minutes in the swim is like 25 minutes of time for you. You're like, oh my God, my day's over. Right? I'm never going to hit my goal today. Or I must be having a bad day, you know, or I'm not going to get this back. Like, what? Like, 'cause that's the thing is like, you know, you have no idea again until you like do kind of the debrief with your coach or with the other athletes or spectators. They could be like, yeah, dude, you were in a washing machine. The waves were so much harder than you thought. There were swells, you know, there was you know, the current was you were swimming against a current half the time. all these things, all these things add up. The course was long, right? This is something I tell athletes. Everybody was slow today. Everybody. And there are races like that where the course is always long. And I tell people, you're going to be slower today than you think because of how the course is laid out. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter fitness wise. Everybody was slow today. And there are tons of races like that where you just know, as a coach, you see the first 3 come out of the water and they're all a little bit slower than you thought. Then you tell yourself, it's that the conditions are just a little bit slower today. And it's that you see those, again, watching like, athletes come out of the water and they look at their watch immediately, right?
Yep.
It's either jubilation and they're so pumped and their face is red from excitement, or it's like Debbie Downer and they start walking, they immediately start walking. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm already behind the 8 ball. This is not my day. When it's like, again, 180 seconds slower than what they thought. To you, it's a lifetime.
Yeah. One quick, because there's a relevant story to that for me. It was my first year when you were coaching me. I had these absurd goals in my head and got into that water up at Wisconsin, and it was pretty rough that first year. And it was mass start. So I think when we got out of the water, they actually had a clock there. I don't remember looking at my watch, but I remember seeing the clock. And because first of all, it seemed like it took me like 3 days, and then I got out and I had this goal. I think it was like sub 11:30 or something like that for my friend. I didn't tell anybody. I was just sort of like, I feel like I might be, and I got out of the water and I think my swim was 1:23 or something like that. And when I got out and I was beat up, first of all, and I looked at that clock and I'm like, well, there goes that goal, And I honestly, though, in retrospect, and it was a good thing probably it was my first because I didn't know any better, but I think it saved my day. Because if I had come out maybe like 7 minutes or 4 minutes fast, something like that, I would have been like, okay, that was in the realm of what I thought I could do, and now let's go crush that bike, But in retrospect, I ended up having to kind of take it easy because I recalibrated my goal almost instantly on that moment. And I think those are the things, like you said, it's like, don't bag it in, just kind of reshift it and find something else, because otherwise it's going to be, I think I set it to 12 then or whatever in my head, and there's a half-hour difference. And if I would have really been bummed and still tried to go out and do it or whatever, I could have been 13 or 14. You know what I mean? It can easily flip like that. So I think if you just have a few different tiers of overall goals too, to kind of keep you in check and not throw away the day just based on something like that.
I love it. And when we on the next cast talk about the bike, you'll have to share your story about the gearing on your loop, the bike course.
Okay.
And how that you think that changed. You know the story I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, totally know.
Yeah. But yeah, we're gonna do a quick 2-parter today before I hit the road, and to make sure we deliver as promised, our 2 podcasts a week. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for coaching advice or help for the rest of the year, look at our coaches tab and find the coach that's right for you. If you need anything from Mike specifically, he's available, CrushingIron@gmail.com. If you got that wild hair in your ass and you need something from me, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
See you in a minute.
All right, bye.